There aren't many franchises that come to mind that can spark up so much debating and controversy these days like Star Wars can. There are so many reasons and talking points that casual fans and diehards argue over without fail regarding this catalog of media. And rightfully so. The original movies are such inspired pieces of film. The thought and ingenuity that radiates from these magical cinematic masterpieces is the stuff of legend. And for a good reason. The concepts, locations, characters, relationships, and the whole adventure was just captivating back in the day. And with some of the most amazing practical movie effects, even by today's standards, it's no wonder why people hold Star Wars up so high even today. But personally, I've never thought the actual plots of these movies were all that groundbreaking. They are very good, do not get me wrong, but they aren't the most intricate stories to follow. It's your basic the hero's journey story, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. There's a reason why it's usually the golden standard for writing stories. But the reason I think most people truly like Star Wars is for its universe. The possibility for so many expanded universe narratives that go beyond the locations seen in the movies is so interesting to me, and there have been so many mediums that have taken advantage of that. But the ones that have consistently held my attention are the video games. Now I'm going to keep this brief so we can get on to the thing that you're actually wanting to hear my thoughts on, but I've been playing Star Wars games since I can remember. I think my first one was Star Wars Demolition on the Dreamcast. It was a great introduction to the idea and possibility of a game set in the Star Wars mythos. The characters, the locations, the amazing sound design. Two of my favorite games of all time are Episode 3's tie-in and The Force Unleashed. Both of those games furthered and piqued my expectations for a Star Wars game. I don't care if the plot was stupid.
Yes, Master. I've just run into some old friends.
I don't care if it's not actually what a Jedi can do.
Wait,
All I care about from a video game is that if it's fun and keeps my attention. And when making a game in such a rich setting as Star Wars, I expect that level of detail and polish in the sound and the visual department. I have a feeling that I'm going to be using some of these games as examples to contrast today's subject, so just be prepared for that. And putting a team like Respawn behind this project was a great decision. You guys know how much love and respect I have for these guys and the quality of their work. Titanfall 2 is one of the greatest first-person shooters of all time, and I've been very excited to see what Vince and the team put out once they were done with Titanfall and its severed lymph node brother. But through the months of build-up and trailers, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this project just looked off to me. I can't put my finger on it, but behind all the excitement, I had this little tinge of skepticism of this project. But enough of the history and expectations. It's time to dive into this thing and see how it lives up. Man, I don't even know where to start with this game. It's difficult to find a logical starting point when discussing something like this. Fallen Order is a game that throws a lot of different mechanics and already established systems into a Star Wars themed melting pot. You've got these puzzle-focused dungeons inspired by Zelda, these heavily scripted climbing sequences from Uncharted, the deflection-based combat of Sekiro, and the non-linear world progression of a Metroidvania. So, it's good. It's a very, very good game. The game's opening hours had me a little worried, honestly, but the more I dug in, I think that may have been on purpose. You start out as a hidden Jedi who is pretty much given into a menial life, and is just trying to survive after Order 66 left the galaxy in ruin and the Jedi Order disbanded. It's very slow, but gradually picks up speed. And once you start picking up that momentum in this game, it never stops. And I'm not just talking about the game as a whole, I'm talking about each of the individual pieces of the game too. Just like in any Metroidvania game, when you start off, you're kind of pathetic. But the game gets so much better when you progress and find upgrades to things such as your combat abilities. So your character Cal is a Padawan that never got to formally complete his training. He knows how to use his lightsaber, but he's not very elegant with it. You start out with only a basic swing, some dodges, and a block button that can be timed to parry physical attacks or deflect projectiles. But after some playtime, you can eventually unlock a heavy attack or two that feel really good to finish someone off with. You even find an upgrade that gives you a double-sided lightsaber, which excels in crowd control, but it's not so great at parrying. If you saw my Sekiro video, then you should know how satisfying a perfect parry is to pull off, followed by that sweet instant kill. It was a bit of a mental hurdle to realize the parry doesn't work exactly the same way here as it does in Sekiro, but it's still incredible to pull off. Some of the enemies are easy to stagger and finish off with ease, some have to be worn down before they can be taken out, and some tougher monsters have a string of attacks that, if perfectly parried, leave them open for an instant kill. The timing and hitboxes for some of the enemies' moves were a bit of a challenge to memorize and overcome, but I think my frustrations were still preconceived from how other similar games play. However, the system for healing is nothing you haven't seen before. You have a certain number of uses for an item that fills your health, but the simple way in which Cal snaps his fingers and uses it never gets old. But even still, satisfying is such an appropriate word to use here. The combat in this game is just satisfying. The Force abilities will make my fellow Force Unleashed fans very happy. You only start out with a basic ability that slows down specific objects or enemies. I even kinda used it as a crutch while I got accustomed to the game's controls and feel. But later on, Cal gets more and more in tune with the Force and gets many more fun abilities, like a grab and a push that get a lot stronger as you progress. And you do eventually combine the saber and Force stuff for lightsaber throws and my personal favorite, the grab and stab. The enemies act and react really interestingly in this combat sandbox. There are even certain powers that enemies can take advantage of if you aren't careful. It never reaches the same level of personality and mayhem as the Force Unleashed, but that's for the best. The more grounded combat just wouldn't work if Cal's a superhero. I only died a handful of times and I was playing on the second hardest difficulty, so I think it's a good place for people who are intimidated by Dark Souls games to jump in here. But if you've been playing From Software's titles, you should definitely do yourself a favor and play on the hardest difficulty. It'll be more rewarding that way, but if you're just looking to progress the story and explore these rich worlds, there's no shame in playing on a more casual difficulty. I did notice some core issues with some of the enemies' programming and pathing, however. Some of them just kinda got confused and stood around looking at me if I stopped moving.
I cannot reach him!
And just some other weird stuff happened. Thankfully, these instances were few far and in between, while the bosses were always on top of their game. The boss fights, and with other Jedi in particular, were such standout moments. They were all very challenging, but never frustrating. Their movesets were almost always fair and very fun to learn and figure out how to mess their cycles up. You can even come across some secret bosses in enemy encounters. There are these special beasts to take down that are admittedly pretty easy but really fun to stumble across, and you even get attacked by a few bounty hunters that are after a reward on your head. The surprises never stopped coming and they were always exciting to come across. But if I could nitpick in one place, before enemies of any shape or size do an unblockable move, they flash red to indicate that this attack is gonna hurt if you don't move. Many of the Jedi bosses have this shockwave move that rolls across the ground. However, this shockwave move also gives you that same warning as any other unblockable. So if you try to roll out of the way in the split second your brain has to make that decision, you're getting hit. I think it would have made more sense to have the enemies flash a different color for attacks that require a jump, or maybe even have them flash red repeatedly. But this isn't a major problem and only gets annoying when slightly closer to the bosses. And for the first time in my life, the camera wasn't a big problem for me at all in a third-person action game. That demands a serious round of applause. I think I had one situation where the camera got pushed into a wall and lost me during combat, and sometimes the lighting can change from well lit to pitch black on a dime, which makes it hard to navigate, but that really was it. I was very happy with the camera other than those small things. I was even happy with it the whole time I was exploring these humongous planets. So, full disclosure, I've never played a legitimate Metroid game. I've played several indie Metroidvania games, but never an actual Metroid or Castlevania. This game has single-handedly reintroduced me to how amazing these kind of games are. I don't think a game has made me feel like I was on an adventure like this in a long time. You really do feel like this trashy scavenger punk Jedi when you start out. But the metamorphosis that your characters, your abilities, your lightsaber, and the planets go through is magical. You can stop me when you've heard of these traversal upgrades before. A double jump, special door hacking upgrade, special wall climbing upgrade, an item that allows you to traverse underwater. It's stuff that's all been done before, and I will knock Fallen Order for that. There isn't too much in the way of innovation for exploration. But God, I'd be lying if I was to say that I don't love the hunt for those little nooks and crannies. It's so much fun to get a glimpse of an item or special pathway that makes that little tick on your intergalactic checklist the game provides. Then scour the edges of the galaxy for that one thing that makes you go, ooh, 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 I know what that's for, and then go back and check it off your list. It's the spirit of adventure condensed and put into a Star Wars game. Fans of the expanded universe of Star Wars will be very happy by the level of detail on display here. Planets like Kashyyyk and Dathomir are fully explorable and so easy to get lost in, with tons of those secret optional routes and treasures to come across. And it's even possible to stumble on some of the more tertiary abilities earlier than you may need them if you're curious enough. But to be fair, and since I mentioned it, about that little list. What freedom you would have in a game like Sekiro to find a creative way to get somewhere or try out a new shortcut you see is now discouraged and downright shut down. The game is unwilling to let you take the reins and make your own path or your own fun. They want you to make your way to that cliffside like everyone else and open that shortcut like everyone else. And check off that super hidden secret that you discovered off the cookie cutter checklist they gave you. Deviations from the predetermined path are not allowed. You may have all these planets to go explore and adventure around in whatever order you want, but your path is set in stone. There's no sequence breaking, there's no shortcuts that aren't the ones Respawn put there for you to find. There's just no room for creativity in this tightly made package. I mean, you can't even fall off the little flimsy poles you have to balance on. It's just a little more processed than what I would prefer. All the special animations that Cal has to climb through tight spaces are a little more forgivable since it's obviously buying time for the game to load the next chunk of the level. But the little scripted parts just feel like ways to make the player feel great and awesome even though they're not really doing anything. These difficult maneuvers are obviously heavily assisted by the game. And I know I just got done praising it, but it's still so weird to see a difficulty slider in a game like this. The team has gone on record to say that the game takes inspiration from Bloodborne. It just really feels like Disney was breathing down Respawn's neck during development to not alienate the casual fans by making something that's too obtuse and non-homogenized.
Jimmy? I told you. I'm not gonna tell you again.
I'm serious, okay? Go back inside.
Get back inside. Get back inside.
I was trying to ball with my bros.
Even if the game is a bit of a more scripted approach to a Metroidvania, it still manages to be an exceptional experience overall. I think it's a game that values telling a story of growth over letting the player have complete freedom. Because that's what these games always embody, to me anyway. Growth. And that's a great way to look at Fallen Order. It's a game about growth. The protagonists all have pasts that they're stuck in and are just scared to move forward. Then when they receive the call to action and start to form this small family, things that would have been the least of their worries are now their whole world. Symbols of the past are literally pushed to the breaking point, so they have to move on. Bonds are formed and confidence is newly found in them, and they also make new connections like the perfect goth GF.
I don't know what you're saying.
I still think my previous skepticisms were justified here. I mean, it took me more than 8 hours into my playthrough to warm up to the main protagonist. No offense to Cameron Monaghan, the actor who plays Cal, but he totally seems like a kid that would have gotten bullied. I finally started to like him when he grew a pair and started caring about stuff, which could have very well been the point, you know, growth and all that stuff. But man, The game is so good. It blew my expectations away. Every other Star Wars game I've played holds a very special place in my heart, but this one knocked it out of the park, man. Even if the end of the story was pretty stupid, this is the best Star Wars movie in a long time. And it also just happens to be one of the best games in a long time too. From that superb and recognizable sound design that battles alongside you, to the dynamic score that even forgoes the tradition of having specific tracks play during certain sections or levels and takes a more filmic approach, with lots of the music seeming to change and dynamically shift in tempo and tone as things progress on screen. It's interesting and just proves further that this game is trying to be as movie-like as possible. Plus, the game looks as good as it sounds. The graphical effects and lighting techniques had my eyes glued to the screen. And I've never seen a Star Wars game put so much effort into making you truly feel attached to your weapon. You can customize everything on your lightsaber to be as traditional or as extravagant as you want. And the cutscenes are rendered in real time, so your Gucci saber will be front and center. Even if the physics-based animations may have made Cal's hands and feet do some funny stuff at times, everything else was swimming in weighty and fluid movement that was, again, satisfying to execute. A game like this is begging for DLC in some form or fashion. New planets, challenges, or fun costumes that let me redo battles in fun outfits that look ridiculous. Hell, I'd pay money for some nostalgic Jedi boss fights, or maybe let me actually fight Vader instead of giving me blue harvest balls and making it a dumb QTE. Like, let me go toe-to-toe with Luke Skywalker, or even give me a fight against Darth Maul. Those were the best parts of The Force Unleashed, and if we get creative, they can continue to be the best parts here. I think I've made my points, but in case you've missed it, you should go buy this game. Show the lovely team at Respawn their hard work paid off. I put 15 plus hours in and I plan on 100%ing it, so I would love to see more out of this game, and potentially even a sequel, and the only way to make that happen is to show the mouse where the money is. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, it means the world to me. I have an announcement regarding my open heart surgery for those who care to know. I am going to be split down the middle on the 12th of December, so expect a pretty big halt in video production around that time. I want to say I could possibly get another video out by then, but we'll just have to see. We had a plan for a season finale, so I think I'm going to go ahead and try to get working on that and maybe get it out before I have to leave. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching, so thanks for stopping by and have a great day.